This video covers JavaScript Callback Functions. The structure of this video is as follows. Passing JavaScript functions as variables revisited. JavaScript Callback Functions. The summary. Alright, let's get started. Passing JavaScript functions as variables revisited. This is a JavaScript function. A function is a block of code that will be executed when you call it. A function is written as a code block inside curly braces preceded by the function keyword. The code inside the function will be executed when you call the function. When you call a function, you can pass along some values to it. These values are called arguments or parameters. These arguments can then be used inside of the function. You can send as many arguments as you like, separated by commas. To use the arguments inside of the function, you must declare the arguments as variables when defining the function. The variables and arguments must be in expected order. That is, the first argument gets assigned to the first variable. Because you can assign functions to variables, and because functions are objects in JavaScript, you can pass functions to other functions as variables. Which means that in this case, we are passing function1 as a variable to be used inside of function2. Inside of function2, var1's value will be function1. This is how you can pass functions to other functions in JavaScript. In this case, function2 can use function1 inside of it. JavaScript Callback Functions. This method of passing in functions to other functions to use them inside is used in JavaScript libraries almost everywhere. The common name for the function passed in is a callback function. In computer programming, a callback is a piece of executable code that is passed as an argument to other code, which is expected to call back the argument at some convenient time. The invocation may be immediate, as in a synchronous callback, or it may happen later, as in an asynchronous callback. We will come back to the synchronous and asynchronous callbacks in another video. This is an example of using the callback variable in a JavaScript function. Function1 takes in an argument and issues an alert with the X as its argument. Function2 takes in an argument and a function. Function2 then passes the argument it took in to the function it took in. Function1 is the callback function in this case. As JavaScript has anonymous functions available, you can also pass in anonymous functions as a variable to a function. In this case, the callback function is defined when we are calling function2. Note that we can call the callback function inside of function2 as many times as we like. There is no limit to how many times we can call it. The other thing to pay attention to is that you can pass in as many callback functions as you like to another function. Here in function2, we pass in two variables and two functions as arguments. Inside of function2, we run callback1 with variable 1, and we run callback2 with variable 2. Let's take a look at the code in the JavaScript console to see how it functions. First, we start in the browser with the developer tools open and the JavaScript console ready to go. Function1 is defined so that it emits an alert with the value of the argument that got passed into it. Let's test it. Function1 alerts us with the number 2. Next, let's define function2 so that it alerts us as well. Function2 is defined so that it emits an alert with the value of the argument that got passed into it. It has the exact same functionality as function1. We test it with the number 2. Function2 alerts us with the number 2. This is expected because it's the same functionality as function1. Let's rewrite the definition of function2 so that it takes in a variable and a function. Then, it will pass the variable to the function that was passed in. We name the function being passed into function2 callback. Let's test it by passing the number 2 and the function1 function. It works the same as before. Function2 alerts us with the number 2. This time, however, instead of function2 having the alert command inside of it, it used the command inside of function1. Let's test it a different way this time. We continue passing in the number 2, except this time instead of passing in the function1 function, we pass in an anonymous function. It works the same as before. Function2 alerts us with the number 2. This time, however, instead of function 2 having the alert command inside of it, it used the command inside of the anonymous function we passed in. Let's rewrite the definition of function 2 so that it takes in a variable in two functions. Function 2 now takes in one variable in two functions. We name the functions being passed into function 2 callback 1 and callback 2. It then passes this variable to the first function callback 1. It then passes this variable to the second function callback 2. Let's test it by passing the number 2 and the function1 function in twice. It works the same as before for each function. Function 2 alerts us with the number 2, then alerts us with the number 2 again. Finally, let's test it by passing the number 2, the function1 function, and an anonymous function. The anonymous function will alert the result of adding 2 to the number that was passed into it. First, we get the alert of the number 2, then we get the alert of the number 4. And with that, we have covered what JavaScript callback functions are and how they can be used. This will let us explore topics like AJAX, how D3 does asynchronous requests to the server, and how we can use callback functions to manipulate the data after D3 receives it and parses it for us. The summary. This video covered passing JavaScript functions as variables revisited, JavaScript callback functions, and the summary.